before this episode. If you want to see the words as well as hear them, get exclusive content, access to the regular episodes before anyone else, and take part in the monthly questions and comments edition, you can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify and get all of that for the price of a very average coffee a month. Okay, let's get on with it. For the past couple of weeks, I've been getting DM after DM asking me to look at the words of one person. Now, the trial of Lindsay Clancy is happening right now, but for some reason, it's her husband that's getting a lot of the attention.
When you came into the house and you were taking off your boots and putting things down, was there anything you noticed?
Yeah, the house was really quiet.
Is that unusual?
Yeah.
Is he suspicious? Or have some trial watchers just got too keen to solve a crime that's already been solved? Let's look at what he says and see what we can learn. Welcome to Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you're new here, I've studied the words of thousands of criminals, so I can show you how people use words to lie, to cheat, and to manipulate, but also what the truth sounds like too. So Lindsay Clancy is on trial for killing her 3 children in January 2023, and after that, she tried to kill herself. Now, she claims she should be found not guilty on the grounds she wasn't responsible due to her mental state. Now, her husband, Patrick, he took the stand, and afterwards, many on social media said he didn't come across well. And then they moved to say, maybe he pushed Lindsay over the edge. Maybe he was responsible himself. So we're going to look at his words on the stand. I normally say, when something doesn't sound right, trust your instinct. That's usually a good place to start. So let's look at his words, see what he's saying, see if he's suspicious, and maybe, if not, where those suspicions might have come from. Now, the more you hear and study of someone's words, the deeper the analysis goes. So we're going to listen to a lot of what Patrick Clancy said on the stand. I'll share my full conclusions at the end with all things considered on everything that we've heard. We'll hear him talk about the night of the murders, but first, some more day-to-day conversation to build a bit of a baseline. This is him talking about a visit to her relatives.
Lindsay's demeanor that day.
She was in rough shape.
Rough shape?
Yeah.
How so?
She wasn't talking much. She had low energy. She was really depressed. I just remember when she showed up, my sister-in-law gave her a big hug.
And she was able to get through dinner, eat dinner with everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. She interacted with people, is that correct?
I would say very little, but to some degree, sure.
And she took care of the kids with you while she was there?
We both took care of the kids together.
Everyone?
Right, now that is fairly typical of the early exchanges talking about life long before these murders happened, which is why I thought it was worth showing it to you and looking at the words. The question there is, and Lindsay's demeanour that day, question mark. And he says, she was in rough shape. Now that is a full answer. He directly answers the question about Lindsay's demeanour there, and it includes who, when, and what. It's just full of content and directly answers the question. Who, she, when, was, so in the past, and what, she was in rough shape. Rough shape, and he says, yeah. Now, he confirms that, but he's not in any mood to build on this at all. Now, there's some things around that, maybe that starts to come across as unhelpful, that it's a prodding. You want to give us some more than rough shape, but he's not going to go any further, and I think he's on a mission to give very exact answers and no more. But all the hallmarks here are truthful answers. She was in rough shape, not taking it off onto something else that he wants to cover or to demean her character anymore or to even make his character seem even better. It's just a very simple answer. Rough shape, yeah, is another simple answer. Simple answers tend to denote truthfulness. Now, he doesn't respond to that prodding rough shape. He just says yes. So she asks a question. The attorney asks a question to try and get a bit more and says, how so? And he says, she wasn't talking much. She had low energy. She was really depressed. And what I noticed there was he doesn't drop a pronoun. Someone who's been a bit more casual with their speech, maybe someone who's making it up, wouldn't say who these things applied to. He might say something like, if he was being maybe slightly deceptive in making things up, she wasn't talking much, low energy, really depressed. And the low energy and really depressed would have no pronouns to say who he was talking about. But he talks very straight and very directly about Lindsay. She wasn't talking much. She had low energy. She was really depressed. Interesting that talking much comes before low energy. So she wasn't talking much, low energy, and she was really depressed. I'm going to suggest there's a pattern that we're going to see. See if you can spot it elsewhere here, where her depression comes later on in his list of priorities. When we list something, normally it's the one that's most important to us that comes first, and then we mention things in descending order of priority. Talking much is the first thing that he mentions. Now, that might be she wasn't talking much to me, so he's narked at that and in a bad mood about that. Therefore, that's why he mentions it first. It could be that this is the most outward sign of how she was that day. She wasn't talking much. She was very quiet. And that's the thing he noticed most. Then the low energy, and then being really depressed. And if she wasn't talking about being depressed, if that was an observation rather than something that he had been told, that's why it might be further on down the priority list against something that he noticed, like not talking much and low energy. And then he says something that's extra. Now, this is quite unlike him here, where he doesn't really tend to say very much that is beyond the scope of the question. And the scope of the question was how so? And he says about her then being, not talking much, having low energy, being depressed. And then he says, I just remember when she showed up, my sister-in-law gave her a big hug. Now, he might be trying to give across the impression that she looked so low, she looked so rough that the sister-in-law felt like she needed a hug. But he doesn't say all that. It's just a bit of an image that he's getting across here. And also, this might be nothing, but it's I remember when she showed up, not when we showed up. If they arrived as a couple, I would expect we to be the pronoun that is used. And we'll see a lot of we coming soon. We'll also see when the we stops, by the way, which indicates a relationship breaking down. But it's when she showed up, my sister-in-law gave her a big hug. Was she able to get through dinner, eat dinner with everyone? Yeah, he says. Very short, simple answer in response to that. That's standard, just definition of what the truth sounds like in the main. She interacted with people. Is that correct? Is the next question. And he says, I would say very little, but to some degree, sure. Interesting that the answer to the question is at the end of that answer. To some degree, sure. So the sure is she interacted with people. That is correct. And he could have just said that. He could have just said, to some degree, sure. But no, he says, I would say very little. Now, I would say, why not just say she said very little? I would say suggests it's a personal definition, a personal observation there that he is putting on. And it's more important for him to say that it was, very little to some degree interaction rather than, yes, she interacted. And then he's asked, and she took care of the kids while she was there. And he says, we both took care of the kids together. Now, that's interesting. He doesn't say, yes, she did. We both did. He doesn't want to give her very much credit there, I don't think. I think he wants to make sure that it's known that we both took care of the kids. Now, I don't detect that's a lie, but it is slightly different from what he was asked. Was Lindsay looking after the kids? Yes, she was, and then maybe qualify it with we both were. But no, he doesn't give her any credit there at all. It's we both took care of the kids together. Now, we do have those joint pronouns there, we, and also the jointness of together there. So I get the sense here they were a couple working together, but it's very important for him in his answer not to give Lindsay the credit for looking after the kids. For whatever reason, it could be true, but he doesn't want to give her the full credit for looking after the kids. He wants some of that credit for himself. The next part is more of this sort of baseline chat.
You mentioned earlier that your wedding anniversary is in December. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall going out for your anniversary on December 3rd, 2022, going into Boston?
No, we didn't go out.
You don't recall arranging for a massage for Lindsay and then going to the Omni Parker house and going out to dinner that night?
No, December 3rd, 2022, we stayed home.
You stayed home, okay. Showing you a photo of you and Lindsay. You recognize this photo?
Yeah.
And when was that taken?
I'm not really sure.
It wasn't taken on December 3rd when you were out celebrating your anniversary?
In 2022?
Yes.
No. No, we wanted to go out, but we canceled because she wasn't feeling well. So we stayed home. We got takeout.
Okay. Did you also, on November 26th, 2022, go out as a family to get a Christmas tree?
Yes. Well, probably. I don't know. But yeah, around that time, yes.
Okay.
This is just a perfect example, more or less, of how he wants to answer the question very exactly. No leeway for doubt in his answers. Do you recall going out for your anniversary on December 3rd, 2022, going into Boston? He says, no, we didn't go out. Now, that is, again, it's just one of those really straightforward answers. Do you recall going out for your anniversary on that date? No is the first word that he says. I believe that. No, we didn't go out. We've got that joint pronoun again. We didn't go out. He's not blaming her at this point for the fact that they didn't go out. He's just saying, no, we didn't go out. So the pair of them in the same boat there, that shows unity in his pronouns. She gives him a little bit more detail in her next question. You don't recall arranging for a massage for Lindsay and then going to the Omni Parker house and going out to dinner that night? And he says, no, December 3rd, 2022, we stayed home. So he's sticking to his answer. There's consistency there in what he says. There's that quick no as well, which is always an indication that the truth is highly likely to being told. But he does miss something out. He doesn't say about did he arrange the massage or not. He doesn't want to talk about that, or he's forgotten to mention that whatsoever in that question. He just doesn't answer the part about arranging a massage there. He's maybe holding something back there. You stayed at home, okay. Then there's an edit. If you see or hear any edits in the only reason I'm doing that is because there was some court procedural stuff going on, so there were no words said. I'm not hiding things from you or anything like that. The attorney says, I'm showing you a photo of you and Lindsay. Do you recognize this photo? He says, yeah. And again, look, he doesn't want to give any more. You know, he's just sticking to giving the answer to the question that he's asked. Do you recognize this photo? Yeah. Not, yeah, that is me and Lindsay, and, you know, naming the occasion or the time or the date or what they were doing. Nothing like that. It's just, yeah. When was that taken is the question. And he says, I'm not really sure. And he was going to give an answer. I think he's going to say, I think it was whenever, of which he had low confidence in because it's, I think, you know, if you see a picture and you can say exactly when it is, that's Christmas Day 2021. That's my birthday during COVID. Those are the answers, you know, those are the things you say when you're certain. If you don't know, so if there's a picture of you and someone together, you'll be like, oh, I think that was 2019 when we were working together, or yeah, was that, 2023 when we went on holiday together? I think would be the sort of wording that you use there. And I think he's about to say, I think. So he's going to give an answer, but of low confidence. And he pulls out of saying the thing that could be true, might not be true, and says, I'm not really sure. And he uses the word really there, which means he has an idea. If you're not really sure, you've got an idea. You've got something, you're just not 100% certain of it. That's what I'm not really sure means. He's asked, it wasn't taken on December 3rd when you were out celebrating your anniversary. And this is very sharp. He says in 2022, because December the 3rd of any year, they might be celebrating their anniversary. Now, I think the picture he's been shown is of them celebrating an anniversary. It's just not in 2022. So, but instead of giving more information and just being helpful and saying it was at one anniversary, but it wasn't 2022, he seeks to clarify, maybe even buying himself some thinking time while he thinks of what he wants to say here. So he says in 2022, yes, says the attorney. No, says Patrick Clancy. So I believe whatever he's been shown is not a picture of them celebrating their anniversary December 3rd, 2022, but I think it may well be a picture of them celebrating their anniversary, but he doesn't want to give any more helpful information. And then he says some more extra, that something that he hasn't been asked for, because, all he's been asked for is was this picture taken on your wedding anniversary in 2022? He says no. So what else he has to say must be important to him. And he says again, no. We wanted to go out, but we cancelled because she wasn't feeling well. So we stayed at home. We got a takeout. Now, we have lots of we again. It does seem like it was a joint decision. He's not saying it from an egotistical point of view. I wanted to go out and celebrate our anniversary or my anniversary with my wife, but she cancelled because she wasn't feeling well. So she made us stay at home and I got us a takeout, which would be she and I, not showing the same unity of pronouns that we get there. We wanted to go out. We cancelled. She wasn't feeling well, so we stayed at home and we got a takeout. So they seemed to do a lot together that day. I don't think he was I think he was understanding about it. I don't think he was bothered about it just from those joint pronouns. We'll see there is one singular pronoun there. She wasn't feeling well. Interesting. She wasn't feeling well. We know depression is a big theme. Lindsay's depression is a big theme of this trial. But he only puts it to she wasn't feeling well. Was she not feeling well mentally, or was it more physically? He doesn't say what it was that was causing her not to feel well enough to go out that day. We don't know. But for some reason, he doesn't want to be specific about it. Why do you think that is? Let me know in the comments if you want. Then we get more about these things. Did you also, on November 26, 2022, go out as a family to get a Christmas tree? He says, yes, well, probably, I don't know, but yeah, around that time, yes. He wants to be exacting with his answers. If it's found out this was November 25th or 27th, he doesn't want to be wrong. He wants to only give factual answers. So if he doesn't know, and what were you doing on December 26, 2022? Me neither. So he doesn't want to just take a good guess or give something that's probably right. He was going to tell us where he's at with it. So, well, yes. Sorry, he says, yes, well, probably, I don't know. But yeah, around that time, yes. So we're building up a picture of Patrick Clancy, how he talks. I can see him being very direct, but I can also see him being very exacting with his answers. And we're building up to a conclusion at the end of this. Who is he? What's he been talking about? And is there any right for us to be suspicious of the things he said when he was talking in court?
Around December 6, 2022, did Lindsay tell you she was starting a new medication?
I don't remember specifically.
Is it that you don't remember the date, or you don't remember her starting a new medication?
I'm not sure.
Do you remember Lindsay telling you at some point she was starting the medication Seroquel?
Yes.
Do you remember around what time frame that was?
I thought it was before December 6th.
Okay. And do you recall how she was physically after starting the Seroquel?
Awful.
How so?
That was really where her big spiral started. She started to lose a lot of weight, and she became very depressed, and she was having a really hard time.
Do you spot any of the familiar patterns there? He is asked, around December 6, 2022, did Lindsay tell you she was starting a new medication? He says, I don't remember specifically. I think he's worried about, again, being tied down to a certain date. And what ramifications are there for him if it was December 5th or December 7th? I don't know, but he wants to answer very, very exactly, which is why he says, I don't remember specifically, which means he does remember this thing. And he's not giving a slightly more helpful answer, because look, the question is around December 6th. So it's not exactly on December 6th. He could have said around that time, yes. But he doesn't want to provide, he just doesn't seem to want to give helpful answers, just very truthful answers. And that's not me saying he's lying, he's hiding something. He's just in a mode where he wants to be exact with his answers. Maybe that's because he's in court, and giving exact answers in court under oath can be very, very important. Maybe that's his personality. But this is exactly where he's at. Is it that you don't remember the date, or you don't remember her starting a new medication? Is what he's asked next. He says, I'm not sure. That is, I'm not sure about what I don't remember. That I don't buy that. That to me is just kind of wanting not to be the most helpful person in town. Again, doesn't mean he's lying. Just means something is going on there. He's asked, do you remember Lindsay telling you at some point she was starting the medication Seroquel? He says yes. Now there it is. When you ask a wide question, do you remember this at some point, this medication being started? He says yes. Do you remember about what time frame that was? So the attorney is starting to ask the questions that unlock him saying a little bit more. I thought it was before December 6th. So he's being maybe slightly more helpful here. But what does before December 6th mean? November, October, January? 2 years before? He's not really giving any information with which to pin anything down with here. Do you recall how she was physically after starting the Seroquel? He is asked, and he says, awful. Now, was it? He doesn't say yes, because the question is, do you recall? It's not, how, what was she like physically after starting it? It's, do you recall? And he doesn't say, yes, I recall, which would be that very typical locked-in answer that he gives, yes, I recall. And then he'd have to be prompted to give more information. Here, he skips the yes and goes straight to the information. Awful is what he says. So I think he wants to say this, and I think we'll see all the way through this. I'd call it low-key, saying how frustrating he found living with Lindsay in this condition being. He doesn't have outward digs and really go at it with her, but there are these, what I would call low-key frustrations that simmer through, like that awful. How so? The attorney's favourite question. This was really where her big spiral started, is what he says, and the stutter on big is his, not mine. That was really where her big spiral started. Really? Really? He's now being precise and saying that was really where it started, but I think there was a spiral going on before then, but it's the big spiral there. And he could have just said when her spiral started, but he says big spiral, inferring there were other spirals, and he wants to get across the enormity of this one. And he describes it, and there's something interesting here, a pattern we'll have seen before in his words. She started to lose a lot of weight, and she became very depressed, and she was having a really hard time. Now, I've got some reassuring and, maybe some observations that are not so reassuring. The reassuring one there, this is all about her and the effect on her. Quite often, people, who are depressed are sometimes not nice to be around, and the person who's with them, husband in this case, might talk about the effect on them. I found her really hard to be with. She was grumpy with me all the time, or, she just didn't want to do anything with me, or I felt down when I spent any time with them because they were just so bad. He doesn't do any of those things. He talks about the effect on her. She started to lose weight, and she was very depressed and having a hard time. He doesn't talk about the effect on him. So again, I'm getting this picture that this is someone who was caring there, those joint pronouns, and now this realizing the effect on her. What I do notice is, this is when her spiral happened. She started to lose a lot of weight. A visible, noticeable thing comes first and became very depressed. The crux of the matter, and a bigger thing than losing weight, comes second. And that's that ordering again. She was having a third time, comes last in that list of three. The losing weight one comes first. And I wonder, what was going on there again? That is the first thing. Number one, it's the most noticeable thing, losing a lot of weight. And number two, being depressed and having a really hard time with things that maybe have to be conveyed in words between the two of them a little bit more. So I'm wondering, what was communication really like between them? Was Lindsay being forthcoming with everything? Was he trying to talk to her and get answers, or was he not really interested in talking to her? Because once again, he mentions the most noticeable thing. Like beforehand, when they were talking about the visit to the relatives, she was quiet. Here, she's lost a lot of weight, something that is noticeable to an observer, and not necessarily something that someone who talks to the person going through that situation would notice. My guess would be that Lindsay was maybe more noticeably losing weight and not talking very much about where she was, but that is just my guess. So we've got to the story of the night of the murders, and this is Patrick talking about what happened before he left, and when he left, the murders happened. And I just want you to just have a listen to this to see again how exacting he is inside his answers.
As you're getting ready to leave the house to head out to get the takeout, did Lindsay say anything to you?
Nothing specific that I can recall, just other than maybe goodbye.
Do you recall something about discussing something about CVS with her?
Yeah.
Okay. And what did she say about CVS?
She wanted me to pick up some stool softener for Cora.
And she hadn't mentioned that earlier in the text, correct?
Yeah, I don't think so.
So as you're leaving, she asked you to make a second or another stop while you're out. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in response to that request, did you ask her to do something?
I don't remember.
Or if you could just read those to yourself.
Yeah, I told her to text it to me, which she did.
I'm sorry. So that refresh your memory and
Yep.
asked her to text it to you?
Yep.
And did she do so?
She did.
And was that at approximately 5:15 p.m. that she texted PDLX?
Sounds correct.
So your two stops then that night were going to be CVS and the 3V restaurant, correct?
Yes.
Where did you go first?
CVS.
And do you remember the route that you took to get there?
Yeah, I went out our driveway, took a right on Winter Street, and then took a left on the main road and went to CVS.
So it's a pretty direct route from your house to CVS?
Yeah.
Did you see, again, just how exacting he is in his answers? He doesn't want to commit to anything he's not sure of and wants to give the most limited amount of information that does answer the question, but no more in so many cases. Did Lindsay say anything to you as you were getting to leave the house? Nothing specific that I can recall other than maybe goodbye. So that's, yeah, there was some conversation, but there's nothing specific I can recall. So that's, yeah, she did. I can't remember what it was, but he wants to make sure there's nothing specific I can recall. So the attorney has to get more from him by asking more probing questions. Do you recall her discussing something about CVS? Do you recall discussing something about CVS with her? Yeah, he says, but not what it was. He just says, yeah, just that buttoned down information, just the yeah. What did she say about CVS? She wanted me to pick up some stool softener for Cora. And she hadn't mentioned that earlier in the text, correct? He says, yeah, I don't think so. All the bare minimum information. So she asked you to make another stop, correct? He says, correct. In response to that request, did you ask her to do something? He says, I don't remember, because he might have some vague inkling, but he's not going to even let us into his thought process. He's just going to say, I don't remember. So he's shown some text to jog his memory. And he says, yeah, I told her to text it to me, which she did. So we then go through the text and the fact she did, and he's like, yep, sounds correct. So your two stops that night were going to be CVS and the 3V restaurant, correct? Yes, he says. Where did you go first? CVS. He says, nothing. You know, just think about having a conversation with your friend. CVS, because it's closest. CVS, because that means the food wouldn't be cold by the time I got back. Just CVS. Do you remember the route that you took to get there? As an aside, she says route like I do, not routes like I sometimes have to, because that's the way it's pronounced by that person. And he says, yeah, and he remembers the route. Yeah, I went out our driveway, took a right on Winter Street, and then took a left on the main road and went to CVS. Lots more there. Maybe something that he can't really be caught out on. It's the only way from their house to CVS. But he does, just start to offer that little bit more information there. So it's a pretty direct route from your house to CVS. Yes, is what he says. Now, so far, I found him to be exacting. I found him to be direct. Mostly, I haven't really picked up any signs of lying, just being, very exacting. Doesn't sound helpful at all. And for me, this next part is where things start to go a little bit different in the story of what happened that night. I think things start to go slightly off in the words that are used here.
And when you got to CVS, did you go inside?
Yes.
Okay. And what section did you go to in CVS?
I think it was pediatrics.
Okay. And while you're in that section, looking for the medication, do you do something?
I called Lindsay.
And why did you call Lindsay?
Because what we were looking for wasn't there. The shelves were pretty empty. It was still during COVID.
I'm sorry, what?
It was during COVID, so.
Okay, so, and was that call at about approximately 5:33 p.m.?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, did she answer the call?
Yes.
She answered when you called her?
Actually, I think she didn't at first. She called back.
Okay. And did you receive a call back from her about a minute later at 5:34 p.m.?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And can you describe that phone call for us?
It was very brief. I just said, I think there was a generic brand, and I said, is this one okay? And she said, yeah, that's fine.
And what was her demeanor during the call?
She was pretty quiet. It sounded like she was busy. I remember hanging up thinking she's probably in the middle of giving baths or something like that.
So it sounded to you like she was in the middle of something?
Yeah.
Were you able to understand her when she spoke to you?
Yeah.
And did she seem to understand what you were saying?
Yes.
And she didn't seem to have any trouble recalling why you were at CVS or what you were looking for?
That's correct.
And did you, in fact, purchase some Pedialyte at CVS?
Yes.
Right. This is where it takes a turn for me. He's on the usual routine patterns that we see. Did you go inside? Yes. What section did you go to? I think it was pediatrics again. Not wanting to be tied down in case it wasn't pediatrics, in case it was like general medicine or something like that. While you were in that section for looking for the medication, did you do something? I called Lindsay. Why did you call Lindsay? And this is where the pattern breaks, or after this, because what we were looking for wasn't there. The shelves were pretty empty. That's the last we. When I've said these we's show jointness and show unity, this is the last time we hear that word we from him in this timeline, in this telling. The final we that he says, what we were looking for wasn't there. He's asked to do a bit of clarification. So that call was at about approximately 5:33 p.m. He says, yeah. And then did she answer the call? And he says, yes. Direct. Straightforward. Yes. Only it's wrong, as we know, because we've listened to what comes next. Now, you've seen how he only wants to answer and say things he's 100% sure about. If he's not sure about anything, he will say, I'm not sure. And he doesn't even tell us most of the time he's not sure between this or that or what he thinks is highly likely, unless pressed. And yet he says she answered the call. He says yes, directly. But we know that she didn't. There's the pattern break right there. And we're going to see a lot of patterns broken. She answered when you called her, and then he says, actually, I think she didn't. At first, she called back. Now, that at first is really interesting. It's not she didn't at first and she answered the second time. It's that she called back. Is that him trying to use some words to say, I eventually spoke to her, so at first I didn't, but actually I did. It's weird. It's strange. It's a pattern break. She called back. And did you receive a call back from her about a minute later at 5:34 p.m? He says, yeah, that's correct. And can you describe that phone call for us? And this is again pattern break. It was very brief, he said. Now, that's interesting. He's not asked to describe how short or long the phone call was, but that's the first thing that he's gone for was it was very brief. Then he carries on and said, I just said, I think there was a generic brand. And I said, is this one okay? And she said, yeah, that's fine. Now, that word just appears in deception so often. So often I see people try to hide things by saying this is just what happened. The only thing that happened was this I just said this, when they said a whole lot more. And they just want us to focus on how small and trivial it was. Just that word just makes everything sound small. And there was just this one thing. So was more said. That's what that word just indicates to me is a possibility, not a certainty, is a possibility. And it gets more interesting. What was her demeanour on the call? She was pretty quiet. Now, if we look at his literal words that he used, he said, is that generic brand okay? She said, yeah, that's fine. That's 3 words. That's an answer to a question. It's not quiet unless, it was said very quietly, but that doesn't seem to be denoted by demeanour. And then he said it sounded like she was busy. Well, go back to that call. I can only get this generic one. Is that all right? Yes, that's fine. He says that's just what happened in this brief call, but he thinks she was busy. I remember hanging up thinking she's probably in the middle of giving baths or something like that. Remember giving baths, because that will become relevant later. But he's got a lot of observations for a phone call that was about 10 words long in his very brief description of it. He thought she was quiet, even though she only said 3 words and she wasn't asked to say any more than that. She sounded busy. How do you sound busy in a very brief phone call where you go, yeah, that's all right? Maybe you can, but I've got questions as to how he ascertained all of this and why he's gone with all this information now. Can you describe that phone call? It was brief. I asked if we could get the generic medicine. She said, that's fine. He doesn't need to mention any of this other stuff, but he is for some reason. He's going over and aboard. So was the call terse? Was it terse? Was there some atmosphere, some aggro on that call? Also, why does he not know if she was giving bath? Did he not have the conversation? Hi, what are you doing? Or sorry, I didn't get your call. I was giving the kids a bath. Doesn't seem to be anything like that. No discussion about baths or what was going on. Was there some tension in this phone call for some reason, or some tension in their relationship for some reason? Because the patterns were really broken when he's saying he's in CVS there. And then he goes back to them. It sounded like she was in the middle of something. Yeah. Now, were you able to understand her? Yeah. Did she seem to understand you? Yes. Did she have any trouble recalling what you were looking for? She didn't have any trouble. That's correct. It goes all the way back to those routine answers. But we do have, all that stuff in the middle about the phone call where he gets information wrong and where he seems to get a lot of information from one very brief call where there was just a few words spoken. So that adds more to my conclusions. In fact, it takes it off in a slightly different direction. Let's go back to court with Patrick Clancy.
Well, sir, after picking up the order at 3V, where did you go next?
Home.
And do you recall the route you took home?
Probably the same route, one exit on the highway, and then went home.
Okay. Do you recall approximately how long it took you to get home?
I would guess 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay. When you arrived home, where did you park?
In the driveway.
What type of car did you drive then?
A Chevy Silverado.
And was that a white pickup truck?
Yeah.
What kind of car did Lindsay drive then?
It was a Kia SUV.
And once you parked there, were both vehicles now in the driveway?
Yeah.
Trial watchers might have noticed something at the end of that excerpt there. Patrick is asked, do you recall the route you took home? And he says, probably the same route. Now, previously, when he was saying how he got to CVS, he gave us an exact route, just bang, bang, bang. But on this one, he hasn't said yes. Do you recall the route you took home? Yes or no, but probably. He says probably the same route. There's something different about the way he went home or how he went home than how he went to CVS. I don't know. I'm not saying it's something nefarious. What I am saying is the way he speaks about that travel is different to the other travel that he spoke about on the way out. Do you recall approximately how long it took to get home? He says, I would guess 10 to 12 minutes. So once more, that pattern there, I'm not going to be tied down to something that I'm not 100% sure of. When you arrived home, where did you park? In the driveway. What kind of car did you drive? A Chevy Silverado. That's a white pickup truck? Yeah. And what kind of car did Lindsay drive then? It was a Kia SUV. And once you parked there, were both vehicles now in the driveway? And he says, yeah. You might have got why I'm pausing there. We'll come to it later on. Once you were parked, were both vehicles now in the driveway? And he says, yeah. So I'm building these conclusions, which we'll come to at the end of the episode. We will be back in court very shortly, and he's going to talk about what he found when he went inside the house. We'll go back to the episode in a moment, but if this breakdown hits home, make sure you're following or subscribe to this podcast, because what I'm doing here isn't just a one-off episode. We are building a skill. And like any talent worth having, it takes repetition. The more you hear these patterns, the more naturally you'll spot them in your actual life. I hear it from listeners so often. Eventually, you can't unhear this stuff. You'll be in a meeting or on a call, and you'll start noticing the subtext earlier than anyone else, which gives you an edge in how you respond. If you aren't ready to commit to training just yet, but you found this episode valuable, do me a quick favour. Leave a rating or share this episode. It's the best way to feed the algorithms and ensure these tools get into the ears of the people who genuinely need them. And if you want to be more careful with how you speak, to talk with more clarity, authority and confidence, then do search for my other podcast. It's available everywhere. Just search for How Words Work. Right, let's get back to the episode. We're back in the courtroom now with Patrick Clancy.
When you came into the house and you were taking off your boots and putting things down, was there anything you noticed?
Yeah, the house was really quiet.
Is that unusual?
Yeah.
And when you realized it was really quiet, what did you do?
I called out.
And who did you call out to?
Everyone.
Did anyone answer?
No.
After you called out and no one answered, what did you do next?
I think I don't know the order, but I called down in the basement and no one answered. And then I called Lindsay to see if she was home, because I looked out and I couldn't see her car, but it's because it was dark and her car's black.
Okay, so when you say you called down to the basement. When you approached the basement door, do you remember if it was open or shut?
It was shut.
So did you open it and yell down?
Yeah,
And there was no response?
correct.
Do you recall when you opened the door to yell down whether the light was on or off?
Yeah, it was on, but Lindsay always left the light on.
And you said you called Lindsay. Was that a phone call?
Yeah,
And was that at approximately 6:09 p.m.?
yeah,
And did she answer?
yeah.
After calling down the stairs to the basement, did you leave the door open or did you close it?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I would think I closed it because I always try to keep it closed. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Was it just me, or was there some tension in some of those answers there? And that tension, if we do spot it, is that because as he's talking there on the stand, he knows what it is that he's describing that he's come home to? Or does that denote some tension between the couple on the day, just like the tension I picked up on in the phone call, or the potential tension, I should say, to be fair? When you came into the house, was there anything you noticed? He said, yeah, the house was really quiet. Was that unusual? He says, yeah. So pattern consistent so far. And when you realised it was really quiet, what did you do? I called out, he says. And who did you call out to? And he says, everyone. Now that struck me as, I don't know, it felt like a bit of an aggro answer, an agitated answer, a tense answer. He didn't want to say Lindsay's name for some reason, or Lindsay and the kids. It was just everyone in the world seems to be his answer there. It's one word. It's not very helpful, but just go back and watch it again if you want. And I pick up a bit of tension in that everyone there. Did anyone answer is the next question. No. After you called out, no one answered. What did you do next? And then he says, I don't know the order, but I called down in the basement and no one answered. And he says, I don't know the answer. Pattern specific again. I don't want to be caught out here in anything. So I'm going to say when I don't know things rather than confirming things that may or may not be true. That's so typical of the pattern that we've seen there. But then when he tells the story, as we've heard so far in that clip, and as we'll hear in other clips that are still to come, he has an order. He's not saying, I don't know which order these things are in, but here's all the things I did. He is then telling a story in an order. I don't know the order, but I called down in the basement and no one answered. And then I called Lindsay. And then something I point out a lot, it denotes a jump in time in storytelling, but here also to me, and then denotes the order. I did this and then I did that. And then I called Lindsay, and this is calling on the phone, by the way. It's not calling out to Lindsay. Now, he does use her name there, to be fair. He uses her name a couple of times. And, when we have real disregard for someone, using their name is quite hard for us, I called her. But no, I called Lindsay to see if she was home, because I looked out and I couldn't see her car, but because it was dark and her car's black. Now, he skipped the looking out part in the storyline. Now, that's the first thing we're going to point out at. It's not, I looked out, couldn't see her car, so then I called Lindsay. He jumps backwards in time there. Now, that's something that happens in deceptive stories a lot. Again, I'm not saying this is a deceptive story. I haven't seen enough to know if he's lying or not. But sometimes when people are telling deceptive stories, lying is hard. Making up a story is hard. And you've got to make sure that the lie you're telling fits the facts other people know. For example, if you're telling a lie about something you did, but it's on your phone records that you called someone, you have to make sure that phone call fits inside the lie. And then I called Lindsay to see she was at home, because I looked out and I couldn't see her car. It's not in chronological order. It's a bit of a red flag for me that maybe the truth isn't quite here. I called Lindsay to see if she was home because I looked out and I couldn't see her car, but it's because it was dark and her car's black. But if we went backwards, you do remember the bit I paused at? Were both cars in the driveway? Yes, they were. That's another red flag. That could be explained by he was talking with the knowledge that he has now, that he knew both cars were in the drive at the time. And therefore, when he said both cars were together, he was answering with the knowledge that he's gained since driving up. Or it could be this whole part is not quite true for some reason. And I'm sort of picking up a couple of red flags around some of that. When you say you called down to the basement, when you approached the basement door, do you remember if it was open or shut? It was shut, he said. So did you open it and yell down? Yes, and he's back in pattern now, not giving away too much. There was no response. Correct. Do you recall when you opened the door to yell down whether the light was on or off? Yeah. So that's yes to do you recall? It was on. but Lindsay always left the light on. Now, is this again another sign of tension? Whether, sometimes these are very typical arguments in a relationship about, well, you put the lights off, or, God, you've always got that light on, or, I'm always putting the light off after you. I don't know. Because he doesn't put any judgment into it, to be fair. He's not like, she was always leaving the light on. It's just Lindsay always left the light on. And you said you called Lindsay. Was that a phone call? Yeah. And was that approximately 6:09? Yeah. Did she answer? No. So we're back again to the pattern. And calling down the stairs to the basement, did you leave the door open or did you close it? And then he says, I don't remember, which is just his typical pattern. And then he says, I would think I closed it because I always try to keep it closed. I'm not sure. So the overall vibe is I'm not sure, which would be a fine answer, be a truthful answer. But in the middle of that there, he's saying, I think I closed it, which is unlike him to just say what he thought he did if he's not answered. And I just wonder, is there a juxtaposition there between Lindsay always leaving lights on, me always closing doors because I'm a good person and I always close doors? Is this a bit of low key? Lindsay was bad because she left lights on. I'm good because I always shut doors. I'm not sure, just like he's not sure about whether he shut the door or not. But again, I'm building up a picture now. I really think here there is some tension coming through when he speaks. Let's go back to the courtroom.
And so after you called Lindsay and didn't get a response, what did you do next?
I started checking upstairs.
And where did you check upstairs?
First, the bathroom. I thought maybe they were taking baths, but there's no one there.
And then where did you go?
The kids' bedrooms.
Was there anyone in the kids' bedrooms?
No.
And then did you go to your bedroom?
Yeah.
And were you able to get into your bedroom right away?
No, the door was locked, and that's when I knew something was wrong.
And when you realized the door was locked, did you have a way to unlock it?
Yeah, the previous owners, when they installed the doorknobs, had these these little keys that they taped to the back of each door. So I got the one from Cora's room, and I started unlocking the knob.
Okay. And when you unlocked the door to your bedroom, did you go in?
Yeah.
And what did you see when you opened the door and went in?
I just saw blood everywhere, and the window is open.
The first question that he's asked there is, and so after you called Lindsay and didn't get a response, what did you do next? He says, I started checking upstairs. Now, this is something that I see a lot. It's not I checked upstairs or I went upstairs to check. It's I started checking upstairs. Talking about starting doing something rather than doing something. Why has he used that form of words? Where did you check upstairs? First, the bathroom. I thought maybe they were taking baths, but there was no one there. Interestingly, this is the second time he's thought that baths may have been taken. He thought that on the phone call, and he's thought that again there. So it's plausible. It just seems to be something that he goes to as a potential thing that's happening often. Then where did you go? The kids' bedrooms. Was there anyone there in the kids' bedrooms? No. Did you go to your bedroom? Yeah. Were you able to get into your bedroom right away? And he says, no, the door was locked, and that's when I knew something was wrong. Now, really? He said the house was quiet. Maybe that's just when he suspected something was wrong. He called Lindsay because she didn't appear to be in the house at the first point of looking, shouting down in the basement and calling out around the house, then looking out and not seeing her car. That's when I knew something was wrong. Maybe it's just the word knew he's leaning on there. It's not. That's when I went from suspecting something was wrong to knowing something was wrong. An interesting bit coming up here. When you realised the door was locked, did you have a way to unlock it? And he goes to a large story about the previous owners and what they did to install doorknobs, where they have the keys, where the keys are taped to, which one he got, specifically Cora's room, and started unlocking the knob. Again, not unlocked the doorknob. It's I started unlocking the knob. Now, this again could be slightly suspicious, this long bit of storytelling. However, I think this is just something that lots of us do. When he unlocks the door, and he's going to have to start talking about some really horrible, horrible things, as we'll hear. So this, I think, is him telling this overexpanded story way outside of his baseline of being really buttoned down, very expansive, explaining a lot. I think this is just easier. It's easier to talk about the previous owners and the doorknobs and where the keys are and which key he got, rather than going into something which is going to be traumatic to talk about. And that's what I think is happening there. When you unlocked the door to your bedroom, did you go in? Yes. Yeah, he says. What did you see when you opened the door? I just saw blood everywhere and the window was open. We've got that word just again. I think there was a lot more he experienced. Potentially, again, this is a trauma. He doesn't want to explain it in any vivid detail. So he's just going to say, I just saw blood everywhere and the window was open. Let's listen to some more from Patrick Clancy on the stand. And is it just me or is there something missing in his words here? Have a listen.
Did you walk into the room and over to the window?
No,
How far into the room did you get?
probably 1 or 2 steps, and then I immediately turned around and went outside.
And the blood that you saw, where was that located in the room?
It was everywhere. It was, it looked like it was sprayed almost with like a hose, and there was a huge puddle in the middle of the room, and it was sprayed all over pretty much every surface. I remember it was on the doorknob.
After making those observations in the bedroom, what did you do next?
I ran downstairs and went outside.
And do you recall whether you went out the front door or the back door?
I went out the back door.
So that would be the sliders, is that right?
Yeah.
And where did you go from there?
I just looked around in the backyard below that window, and I saw Lindsay.
And where did you see her?
She was face up in the backyard,
And where in the backyard was she?
at the bottom of the window.
More of his patterns, but some unexpected things as well. Did you walk into the room and over to the window? No, he says. How far into the room did you get? He said probably 1 or 2 steps. And that's all he's needed to give the typical Patrick Clancy answer to the question, but he wants to go a bit further. So probably 1 or 2 steps. And then I immediately turned around and went outside. Now, was it immediate? Or does he want to get across the fact that he moved very quickly? Because he says, I immediately turned around and went outside, not ran downstairs and ran outside. He turned around and went outside. That word immediately might just be trying to convince us that he moved a little bit faster than he did. When he's asked then to describe the blood, and he says it was everywhere again. I remember it was on the doorknob. After making those observations, what did you do next? I ran downstairs and went outside. So we do have the running. Now we have that fast movement. Do you recall whether you came around, whether you went out the front door or the back door? And he ascertains it was the back door. And then she says, and where did you go from there? And he says, I just looked around in the backyard below that window and I saw Lindsay, which is not answering the question. It's where did you go from there? Into the backyard. That would be the classic Patrick Clancy answer, and that would also answer the question directly. But he doesn't say. He says, I just looked around in the backyard below that window and I saw Lindsay. Where did you see her? She was face up in the backyard, his answer. Now, that's not where, that's how she was. So I don't know, is this just a very vivid, horrible memory that when he calls it to his mind, he has to, say what he sees in his head because it's so vivid? Or actually, is there something in that, the fact that he said face up in the backyard? He doesn't answer the question directly. I think it's probably the vividness of what was there. At the bottom of the window, and where in the backyard was she? At the bottom of the window is what he says. So we're going to get some more from Patrick, and this is him describing his discussions with Lindsay, who is lying there in the backyard.
Did you ask her anything else?
I said, where are the kids?
And what was her response?
She said they're in the basement.
And at that time, she didn't tell you that they needed help or they were in danger or they were injured, correct?
Correct.
And so you mentioned talking to someone on 911. At what point did you call 911?
I don't know the exact time, but it took a few minutes because my phone was switching between Wi-Fi and 911. So I almost just started calling out for the neighbors, but eventually it went through.
Okay. So you had some difficulty connecting, but eventually you connected to the 911 operator?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you stay on the phone with them while they were sending people to respond?
Yeah.
So much there, back in pattern now. And another pattern that we've got, I want to call out there. So did you ask her anything else? I said, where are the kids? What was her response? She said they were in the basement. And at that time, she didn't tell you that they needed help or were in danger or that they were injured, correct? He says, correct. Now, there, if ever, is a chance to be angry, to have a go at what she did. Not for her not to say how urgently these kids needed help, just to go, they're in the basement. But he doesn't show any of that at all. He's very matter of fact, not putting any emotion in there at all. He really could do her some damage, her image some damage there by getting emotional there. And he chooses not to do that in his words. And then he just goes back to the exact same pattern. When did you call 911? I don't know the exact time. Again, I believe him here, but he doesn't want to be drawn into anything that he's not exact about. Did you have some difficulty, but you eventually connected? Yeah. Did you stay on with them while there were people to respond? Yeah, he says. So that strangeness that I've noticed from basically the call in CVS all the way through to finding Lindsay under the window, that's disappeared now. And he seems to be very much back in pattern. We're going to listen to one more bit from Patrick Clancy. And this is him talking about a conversation he had with Lindsay after the night of the murders.
Did you receive, a few days after this happened, did you receive a phone call from the defendant while she was at Brigham and Women's Hospital?
I think it was like a week or so after, yeah.
And what did the defendant say at that time about what had happened with the children?
She didn't talk about our kids. She talked about what she went through.
And what did she say about what she went through?
She said she heard a man's voice telling her that if she didn't do it now, she would lose her chance or something like that.
And did she also tell you that she had had a moment of psychosis?
I don't recall.
Did she mention the children at all during that call?
I don't think so. I mean, not directly.
Had she ever mentioned psychosis to you before?
No, I didn't know what psychosis was until after this happened.
Did she ever tell you she was hearing a man's voice before?
No.
So this phone call then that they had, did you receive a phone call from her? I think it was like a week or so after. Yeah. So, was it a few days later? He again wants to just not say anything that's not factual. I think it was like a week or so after. Yeah. What did the defendant say at that time about what had happened with the children? She didn't talk about her kids. She talked about what she went through. Interesting. Look, we do have a joint pronoun there. She didn't talk about her kids. She talked about what she went through. And you'll notice that as we've been talking, the we's have gone since that call. And there's just that our kids that's left over there, but she talked about what she went through. Now, that could have been answered. Did she talk about what happened with the children? She didn't talk about the kids, just like that. But he goes a little bit extra. She talked about what she went through. And that's what I mean by that low key sort of having a go at her and her character, not making the words work really hard to say what a bad person she is. What did she say about what she went through? She said she heard a man's voice telling her that if she didn't do it now, she would lose her chance or something like that. Again, not wanting to be committed to anything he's not 100% certain about. Did she also tell you she had a moment of psychosis? I don't recall. Same thing. Did she mention the children at all during the call? I don't think so. Not directly. Has she ever mentioned psychosis to you before? No, I didn't know what psychosis was until after this happened. A little bit extra there to say, I had no idea about any of this is an impression he wants to get through. And did she ever tell you she was hearing a man's voice before? A really plain and simple no. We've listened to a lot of Patrick Clancy on the stand, breaking down his words across the times before the murder, the night of the murder, and also what happened after the murder. It's time to draw everything together and let's get some conclusions together. So, I think, as you know, because I've been quite clear all the way through here, he is on a mission to be very exact and precise with his information. He's flagging when it's a best guess. Sometimes this is to the point of where it feels unhelpful, but I don't see he's lying when he does that. He actually seems to be really, really focused on only speaking the truth when he does that. Nothing in his language shows a fractured relationship before the night of the murders. Then when the night of the murders comes, we get that sense of tension and fractured relationship. But I do think there is a sense of annoyance with Lindsay that comes through when he talks about her on the night of the murders. But his words, especially beforehand, do convey a sense of care and understanding about Lindsay's condition. He doesn't talk about the effect on him at all, or even the effect on the kids. He seems to be really aware of the effect of Lindsay's mental health on Lindsay herself. But then on the night of the murders, his wording changes and I sense he's holding back something. Perhaps he had suspicions that night that something bad was going to happen, or that something bad was happening on that phone call from CVS, and he doesn't want to share those. Maybe that's because he feels guilty, or he doesn't want people thinking bad of him, because instead of going straight back home when he thought something was up, he went and got some takeaway. Now, let's talk about image management, because I see that a lot when I see liars talk. I see a lot of image management, people trying to make themselves look good or trying to make other people look bad. And we see that in words that work way too hard, words that work way harder than they need to. And I don't see any of that with him, either to put himself in a good light or to put Lindsay in a bad light. I don't see that happening at all. Yes, there's that annoyance, but it seems to be, low-key, authentic annoyance. It's maybe even leaking out that he doesn't want to say some of these things out loud, but it does seem to be leaking out. So there you go. That's what I've got in the guy. Why are people suspicious of him? I think it could be that exactness may make people think that he is hiding something because he doesn't want to be pinned down to something that he doesn't believe is true. But for me, this is him always trying to be truthful. When he's on the stand, under oath, he's always trying to be hopeful, to be truthful. He doesn't seem to be helpful with his answers, when he talks. That can make him seem maybe not very warm and very cold. But I just see he's about being truthful. He's not hiding something. He's being very sterile sometimes when he talks. He's not sharing his emotions. He's sharing his actions. And again, that could be why people haven't taken to him in his words. But people may have noticed that change that I noticed when he was talking about the night in question, the call from CVS. I suspect some of the suspicion that's towards him may be that people have noticed something around then, because something changes in him here when he's telling that story. And perhaps it's that suspicion that something was on that call that he doesn't quite want to share. That's what I got. What do you have? Let me know in the comments if you can, or get in touch in the socials. You'll find those all listed at neveratruerword.com. Also there, you'll find a load more people on trial or people on the witness stand. And when I'm looking at whether we can tell whether they're telling the truth or where they're lying by analysing the words that they use. That's neveratruerword.com. I'll see you soon for something new from Never a Truer Word. Just like Patrick Clancy, if there's someone that you'd like me to look at, do let me know. Get involved on the email or in DMs as well, or on socials. I'll always take time to see what people want me to talk about. So I'll see you soon for something new from Never a Truer Word. And remember, the truth is always in the words.